Hello, and welcome back to the Loco Files. In today's episode, we'll be looking at what many may consider Grizzly's masterpiece, his A4s. The A4 class is a class of streamlined 462 Pacific steam locomotive designed by Sir Nigel Grizzly for the London and North Eastern Railway in 1935. Their streamlined design gave them high-speed capability as well as making them instantly recognisable, and one of the class, 4468 Mallard, holds the world record as the fastest steam locomotive. 35 of the class were built to haul express passenger trains on the East Coast Main Line from London King's Cross via York to Newcastle, and later via Newcastle to Edinburgh in Scotland. They remained in service on the East Coast Main Line until the early 1960s, when they were replaced by Deltic diesel locomotives, they themselves proving to be worthy successors to the A4s. Several A4s saw out their remaining days until 1966 in Scotland, particularly on the Aberdeen to Glasgow express trains, for which they were used to improve timings from 3.5 to 3 hours. By the 1930s, the railways were beginning to see increased competition from road and air travel. It was clear that services between the major cities had to be faster, more reliable, and more comfortable. Also, a number of high-speed diesel trains were attracting the world's headlines. In May 1933, the German State Railways diesel-electric Fliegend Hamburg entered service, with long stretches of 85 miles per hour required by the scheduled timetable. By 1934, the US Burlington Zephyr had reached 112.5 miles per hour, during a 1,015-mile-long journey. Grizzly travelled on the Fliegend Hamburger and was impressed by the need for streamlining, although he realised it was only useful at the highest speeds. From this, he calculated that a streamlined and modified A3 design would be able to haul trains of 8 or 9 carriages at similar speeds. A series of trials were carried out to confirm that a modified A3 design would be sufficient. During these trials, A1 Flying Scotsman broke 100 miles per hour, and A3 Papyrus managed average speeds almost as fast as the Fliegend Hamburger, but with a larger coach capacity. On this latter run, Papyrus managed to set a speed record of 108 miles per hour. With these trials under his belt, the LNER board gave Grizzly the go-ahead to create the Silver Jubilee streamlined trains. The wedge-shaped streamlining on the A4s was inspired by a Bugatti railcar, which Grizzly had observed in France. The design was refined with the help of Professor Dolby and the wind tunnel facilities at the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington. As well as streamlining, it was important that the design lifted smoke up away from the cab. At first, there was a lot of difficulty in achieving this. Even smoke deflectors were considered. During the wind tunnel tests, it was noticed that a thumbprint had inadvertently been added to the plasticine model, just behind the chimney. Only on impulse was the model retested with the thumbprint. Amazingly, the smoke was lifted well clear of the cab. The LNER publicity machine had a field day with their new streamlined shape. Many saw this publicity as mere hype though. Some thought the LNER was bowing to the latest craze. Others thought that it was not true streamlining, and that the design team did not know what they were doing. In fact, experimental data showed that a 40% reduction in horsepower was required when powering from 60 miles per hour to 150. The high speed of 150 miles per hour was used to simulate a headwind. This saving ranged from 41 horsepower at 60 miles per hour to 639 horsepower at 150. As well as the characteristic streamlining, a number of other things were modified from the A3 design. All of the steam passages were streamlined, the boiler pressure was increased from 220 to 250 psi. The cylinders were decreased slightly in size so that the valve diameter could be increased to 9 inches. This produced free steaming within the restrictions of a 3-cylinder design. As with the A3, Woolshart's gear was used on the outside cylinder, and Gresley's conjugated valve gear was used on the inside cylinder. Further refinements were added at a later date, including the Kylchap double blast exhaust and Westinghouse QSA brake valves. A demonstration run from King's Cross to Grantham on the 27th of September 1935 touched speeds of 112.5 miles per hour. The first service was on the 1st of October 1935, hauled by number 2509 Silver Link. A further 3 locomotives were built for the Silver Jubilee service to Newcastle. This service was a great success, cutting the travel time between King's Cross and Newcastle down to an amazing 4 hours. This success led to an extension of the service to Edinburgh, and the building of a further 5 A4s. By 1937, a third service to Leeds and Bradford had commenced, and thus Britain's first intercity network of fast train services was born. The Silver Jubilee service to Newcastle was a success from the beginning. This was because it supplied the public exactly what they wanted: a fast, reliable service between 2 major cities. Success was so great that these trains were extended from 7 coaches to 8 coaches. Reliability was such that it was said that the people of York checked their watches against the characteristic chime whistle of the Silver Jubilee A4 coming through York Station. The Silver Jubilee was also safe. Never in the 4 years up to the Second World War was it involved in a major mishap. The A4s were also mechanically reliable. On only 10 occasions out of the 1,952 Silver Jubilee services did an A4 experience a mechanical problem. The drivers and firemen were happy too. They found the A4s easily took the loads required of them. they also found the footplate very smooth. This was demonstrated on the original publicity run when the driver and fireman thought they had barely gone above 90 miles per hour. In reality, they had touched 112. Another A4 trial was performed on the 27th of August 1936. This time, the newest A4, 2512, Silver Fox, was chosen, and was driven by Silverlink's driver George Henry Haygreen. The trial was a scheduled fare-paying service, and it was intended to measure water and coal consumption, and to beat Silverlink's 112 mph record. Total load with the dynamometer car was 270 tons. Alas, they sadly never told George Haygreen that a record attempt was being made on Stoke Bank. This meant he neither had sufficient speed on the run up to Stoke Bank, nor was there sufficient reserve of boiler pressure. By pushing hard, 113 mph was reached. This is thought to be a British record for a revenue-earning steam locomotive. But the locomotive had to be pushed hard, and the middle big end suffered damage. Possibly a bit of foreshadowing for the run that would cement the A4s in the history books. The train arrived into King's Cross 7 minutes late. On the return journey, 2509, Silverlink was substituted and arrived 4 minutes early. The results of the trial were that the A4s had a reserve of power, and a 10-coach train would be perfectly feasible for a planned Glasgow to London service. On the 28th of June, 1937, Stanier's streamlined Coronation Scott of the LMS set a new record of 114 miles per hour. 2 days later, a press and publicity trip for the LNER's new Coronation service was pulled by number 4489, Dominion of Canada. It attempted to regain the record. Unfortunately, it only managed to reach 109.5 miles per hour on Stoke Bank. With these increasing speeds, braking distances were getting longer, and so methods to improve braking were investigated. Gresley favoured the use of a system produced by Westinghouse and was already in use on the LMS. And so trials began in 1938. Trials typically required rapid acceleration followed by a brake test. On the 3rd of July 1938, the Westinghouse team arrived to find that the train consist had changed. Some of the coaches had been removed and replaced with the dynamometer car. Also, the locomotive had been changed to 4468 Mallard. Only 4 months old at this time, the A4 was the first to be fitted with the Kyle Chap double blast pipe. The driver was also different, J. Duddington, who had been brought down from Doncaster and had a reputation for running trains hard when it was required. Duddington was joined by fireman T. Bray and Inspector J. Jenkins. When the Westinghouse team were on board, they were told that they were going to attempt to break the speed record. Why the secrecy? One reason was so that the LMS did not catch wind of the attempt beforehand. Another might have been that the LNER's civil engineering department were not keen on 120 plus mph runs when the track had official speed limits of only 90. The down journey consisted of conventional brake tests. At Barkston, the Westinghouse team were given the option of taking a taxi to Peterborough. They all refused. The centre big bearing was drowned in cylinder oil, and the return journey was commenced. Grantham was passed at 24 miles per hour. By Stoke's signal box, the speed had reached 74.5 miles per hour, with full regulator and 40% cut-off. At milepost 94, 116 miles per hour was recorded, along with the maximum drawbar of 1,800 horsepower. 120 miles per hour was achieved between milepost 92.75 and 89.75, and for a short distance of 306 yards. 125 miles per hour was touched. A peak of 126 miles per hour was marked on the dynamometer rolls, and this speed was included in some unofficial reports. 126 miles per hour is also the speed marked on the plaque mounted on Mallard by BR in 1948. Shockingly, Gresley never accepted the speed of 126 miles per hour and believed it to be misleading. The LNER only claimed a peak of an average of 125 miles per hour, so breaking the world record for steam traction held by the German state railways of 124.5 miles per hour, and the British record set by the LMS. When Mallard arrived at Peterborough, it was found that the centre bearing had overheated. It was then towed to meet the press at King's Cross behind an Ivet Atlantic. Just imagine, you've broken the world speed record for steam locomotives, and then an Atlantic comes along just like, "Hey up, I see you got bearing trouble. Mind if I take you to the cross?" Must have been a bit humiliating, actually. Ah well, history is history, isn't it? This must have led to some confusion, but the overheated bearing was quickly remetalled. A further check was made that everything was okay, and Mallard was back in revenue earning service within 9 days. Over 85 years later, Mallard's record of 125 still stands. Although the Second World War did not start until the 3rd of September 1939, the last streamlined services ran on the 31st of August 1939, due to the enactment of the Emergency Powers Defence Act 1939. Initially, the King's Cross A4s were put into storage, although the other A4s were kept in service. Eventually, all the King's Cross A4s returned to service. Generally, the A4s were called upon to pull loads much heavier than originally intended. They did this well, although reduced maintenance produced some problems, especially with the conjugated valve gear. To aid maintenance, Thompson removed the side skirts from the A4s. Because the A4s were experiencing much increased loads, they occasionally had problems starting off. To help with this, Thompson had the valve gear modified so that a maximum of 75% cutoff was possible. Only 6 locomotives were converted during wartime, with the remainder being converted between 1946 and 1957. A rather peculiar wartime change was the removal of most of the chime whistles. It was thought that these might be confused with air raid sirens. Not really sure of the logic, but hey ho. These were removed in 1942 and destroyed. New chime whistles were built after the war, however. On the 29th of April 1942, number 4469, Sir Ralph Wedgwood, was severely damaged by a bomb blast during an air raid in York. Both number 4469 and neighbouring B16 were scrapped, although the tender from Sir Ralph Wedgwood was kept and later used on Thompson A2/1 3696. An attempt to renumber the A4s was proposed by Thompson in 1943. Implementation only started after the war in 1946, before a new numbering system was chosen by the LNER, with the premier A4s taking numbers 1 to 34. This was implemented in the latter half of 1946. In 1948, the railways were nationalised and the A4s came under the control of British Railways. The A4s were renumbered again by adding the prefix of 600 to all the numbers. In the summer of 1948, BR performed a series of locomotive trials comparing the different classes from the Big Four companies. The A4s produced some good results and had the lowest coal and water consumption figures of any express engines. Unfortunately, there were 3 A4 failures, all related to the conjugated motion. These are thought to have been due to poor wartime maintenance. The Gresley conjugated motion worked well if it received good maintenance. Also, during the summer of 1948, there were attempts to restart the non-stop services. In August 1948, serious flooding caused the collapse of a number of bridges and culverts on the East Coast Main Line in the southeast of Scotland. Hence, many of the trains were diverted via Selby and Leeds over the Settle and Carlisle line. From the 24th of August, the A4's non-stop run was diverted over the Waverley route to St Boswell's, then via Kelso to Tweedmouth to rejoin the main line. On this first run, number 60028 Walter K. Wickham managed to run non-stop from Edinburgh to King's Cross, a record-setting distance of 408 miles. These runs required some luck as regards to signalling, but the drivers took great pride in achieving a non-stop run. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, maintenance of the locomotives and the permanent way improved, so facilitating speed increases of the A4's pre-war speeds was never reached. Although in 1959, 6007 Sir Nigel Gresley set a post-war steam record of 112 miles per hour. By the late 1950s, steam was being replaced by diesel power. Although the Deltics proved worthy successors of the A4s, on the East Coast Mainline Express services, other diesel classes were generally very poor and often failed. Hence, the A4s were kept in service until the mid-1960s. The first A4s were scrapped at the end of 1962. These were from King's Cross and had been directly replaced by the Deltics. The last BR A4 service was on the 14th of September 1966 between Aberdeen and Glasgow. Apart from the original Sir Ralph Wedgwood that was scrapped in 1942, the next 5 withdrawals in December 1962 were 6003 Andrew K. McCosh, 60014 Silver Link, 60028 Walter K. Wigham, 60030 Golden Fleece, and 60033 Seagull. The rest of the class was withdrawn between 1963 and 1966. The last 6 in service were 6004 William Whitelaw, 6007 Sir Nigel Gresley, 6009 Union of South Africa, 60019 Bittern, 60024 Kingfisher, and 60034 Lord Farringdon. 60019 and 60024 were the last to be withdrawn in September 1966. 6 members of the class have survived into preservation. 3 of them were assigned to sheds in Scotland after the closure of King's Cross Shed 34A to steam in 1964. Allegedly, 60024 Kingfisher was also planned for preservation, but was instead scrapped after several mechanical problems were discovered with it. 4 A4s are in the UK and have run on the BR main lines at some point during their preservation career. Another 2, Dominion of Canada and Dwight D. Eisenhower, were donated to Canada and the US respectively upon withdrawal by British Railways. Both North American-based A4s, along with the other 3 British-based ones, were moved to the National Railway Museum in York in late 2012 on 3-year loans as part of the NRM's 2013 celebration of the 75th anniversary of Mallard breaking the world speed record for steam, bringing all 6 preserved A4s together for the first time. During 2013, 4464 Bittern underwent a series of high-speed runs, partly in commemoration of Mallard's record, partly to see if mainline speeds for certain heritage steam locomotives could be increased, as the current maximum is 75 miles per hour, and that remains to this day. During the Tyne Tees streak run, Bittern broke its own 91 mile per hour speed record set just a few months prior by reaching a maximum speed of 93 miles per hour. From 2015 to 2020, Union of South Africa was the only A4 operational with a valid mainline certificate, until it expired in 2020. 6007 was withdrawn for overhaul on the 20th of September 2015, and 4464 Bittern operated until the end of 2015 at the Watercress line, where it was withdrawn for its overhaul in Crewe. Union of South Africa was withdrawn in October 2021 due to boiler issues, and with the coming expiration of its boiler certificate in early 2022. No A4s are currently operating on the main line, but Sir Nigel Gresley is due to return to services on the 21st of April 2022, following the completion of a major overhaul. I'd like to thank you all for watching and listening. Tell me what you think of the A4s down below in the comments. Do you have any stories of any good times with the A4s? I personally have quite a lot with Sir Nigel Gresley with my grandfather. Do you think that Kingfisher should have also been saved from preservation, or do we have enough A4s? Because having more than one example of a class preserved in LNER terms is as rare as hen's teeth. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments down below. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe. Thank you, and goodbye.